Hello viewers, this is your host Sri Iyer from PGurus channel. Today I have the pleasure of company of Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma ji. Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma ji, welcome to PGurus channel.
Pranam Sri Iyer ji, Namaskar ji, and good evening to everybody from London.
And a quick word to all our viewers. 1 in 2 of you have not subscribed to our channel, and I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to our channel. Right through the entire video that you're going to see here, on the bottom right corner, you will see a subscribe prompt. I mean, you can see the bitmap. If you click on that, it will automatically subscribe you. Just one click and you'll be on. And your subscription helps us to draw a wider range of subject matter experts. You're already seeing that we are now about a dozen or more subject matter experts sharing their thoughts on our platform. And we are trying to make PGurus the intellectual hangout, where if you want to get gyan on anything, first check us out. And we strive to be as much factual as possible, as much unbiased as possible, and as much focused as possible. And thank you for all your donations, and we love you. You can continue to donate to our cause, and we thrive on that also. And more importantly, we think that we can be your guide in choosing the best person to represent you wherever you are, whether it is India or United Kingdom or United States. And as this thing gets more widespread, you'll start us talking about various other countries where the Indian diaspora is in significant numbers. So Satish ji, let's start from where we left off last time, which was that we were waiting to hear about the Labour's manifesto. I mean, the manifestos of all the different parties. What did you make of the Labour Party's manifesto?
It's a great place to start. I think of all of the manifestos, the one manifesto that all of the community, especially the Hindu, Sikh and Jain communities, were looking forward to was to see what was going to be in the Labour Party manifesto. The others tend to be fairly middle of the road, generic, appropriate for all British communities, but the Labour Party's dabbling in community and identity politics has really raised the profile of their manifesto. So yes, it came out, and as soon as it came out, everybody was searching through to see whether that resolution to take the Indian government to the United Nations and demand boots on the ground in Kashmir, whether that would see the light of day. But we're pleased to have noted that, in fact, it didn't feature in the manifesto. I think it's probably also worth mentioning that the fact that it didn't feature is neither here nor there. Manifestos tend to be like sales proposals, aren't they? And sometimes the quality of the manifesto is as terrible as the sales proposals produced by very poor salespeople. So the fact that something is or isn't in there doesn't really make much of a difference. The omission of it, I think, was merely an acknowledgement of the response of the combined dharmic communities to let Labour know that it had been noted and that it wasn't going to be tolerated. And so to try and do a bit of a damage limitation exercise, I think they just omitted it from the manifesto. Most of the community, however, is still convinced that were the Labour Party to be successful, then what will happen is that we will see it return as policy. It was, after all, passed by the democratic processes in the Labour Party conference. So the first thing we noted was that it wasn't included in the manifesto. The second thing we noted was that Kashmir is mentioned, but it's mentioned alongside Yemen, and places where there is perhaps an internal strife, civil war, and things of that sort. And it's a totally different kettle of fish. You know, Kashmir is not in that situation at all. And I think that's partly due to the fact that the Labour Party leaders know so little about what really has happened in Kashmir. So yes, the Labour Party's manifesto came out. Many members were pleased to see that it wasn't in there. But another new manifesto has emerged. Labour have today issued what they're calling their Faith Manifesto. So now they have got a separate manifesto for the faith communities. Some of us are a little unhappy about that, because really manifestos should deal with the British community as a whole. it should be equally applicable to all British citizens who enjoy the rights of the protections that legislation provides to us. So by starting to name little groups, starting to target specific groups with specific policies, this is the classic way in which divide and rule politics starts, isn't it? So yes, we've had an interesting Faith Manifesto, and we're all scrutinizing it.
Well, Satish ji, I remember reading somewhere that they have specific points there to appease specific segments. For example, they said that they would issue an unconditional apology for the Jallianwala Bagh massacre.
That is exactly what they said. And in fact, this has led to a great deal of, shall we say, an adverse reaction. You know, there is something unpleasant about politicians of a former colonial power meddling in the affairs of a former colony on the basis of a lack of information, lack of knowledge. You mentioned the Jallianwala Bagh, and it's quite odd that a Labour politician should be mentioning that, since it was actually a Labour government in power at the time that all of these events took place, and they've never really acknowledged that at all. So there is a strange sense of a distorted history, which seems to be the textbook that the Labour Party is using.
You know, it almost seems like if somebody were to confront Jeremy Corbyn about something like this, he'd say, look, this is not for you. For you, this is what is my manifesto saying, and I want you to just look at this. So he's essentially trying to compartmentalize his vote banks and telling each vote bank, I'm paraphrasing this, of course, I'm just looking at it, I'm trying to guess how this party is working. And they're saying, look, you just look at what we are giving for you. Hey, here's your dollop, here's your dollop, here's your dollop, go away and just vote for us. I mean, this seems to be how they are trying to divide and get the vote, maybe. Because I'm also noticing, Satish ji, that it's not just the Hindu community that's up in arms against Labor. The main rabbi, Chief Rabbi, I think his name is, I'm trying to pick it up, Ephraim Mervis. He has written a very strong letter where he says that Corbyn allowed poison sanction from the top, and he says that this Labour Party is incompatible with the British values of which we are so proud, of dignity and respect for all people. And what is even more surprising is that he has got support from the Archbishop of Canterbury.
You're absolutely right. We've known for a while that the Labour Party leaders and the Jewish community in this country have had a severe difference of opinion, if I can put it in that manner. Anti-Semitism seems to have taken root in the Labour Party, and disappointingly, the leadership seem to have neglected the degree and the importance of this issue. Now, it's very similar to say that the anti-Jewish sentiment is mirrored by the anti-Hindu sentiment that has also pervaded the Labour Party. Now, what we have seen today, though, they issued their Faith Manifesto, and the leader of the Jewish faith community, their chief rabbi, has immediately responded and has effectively kicked it into touch and said, no, this is not good enough. There is a recognition that public statements and then policy statements are actually totally different things. And there is no amount of rhetoric, there is no amount of spin, there's no amount of propaganda or PR which can conceal the fact that over 130 cases of anti-Semitism are being dealt with by the Labour Party's disciplinary processes. And I think there are over thousands of cases that have been submitted to the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, all to do with anti-Semitism. So this is a huge problem, and the failure to deal with it, and in fact the failure to acknowledge the severity, have really rung alarm bells, which has really driven the Jewish community to start to make very strong statements, culminating in the Chief Rabbi's letter of today. And yes, Archbishop Justin Welby has also come out. It's quite surprising because traditionally the Labour Party and the Church of England have always had a bit more of a resonance, shall we say, than the Church has with the Conservatives. And for the Church of England to come out and make such a statement is again a reflection on perhaps how far removed Jeremy Corbyn's core cabal is from what's happening out there in the public space. No, you're absolutely right. As a Hindu community representative, we have a board of Dharmic scholars, as you know, and we get information and we do research, etc. We too have issued a statement today. We've been working on it for a while, but the response to the Faith Manifesto was really necessary today. So we too have issued a response to it, and the response has really gone viral already.
Satish Kumarji, we will come to that in just a minute. I want to finish the talk while we are talking about the Jewish response. I just wanted to enlighten our viewers. Perhaps you could share the percentage of population of the Jewish population in the United Kingdom, the voting population, and their approximate GDP to the country.
Well, the GDP isn't a figure that I've been able to find. I'm looking for it. I would love to find out what all the GDPs per community are.
It will be very high, I can tell you that.
But it will be very high. I'm fairly confident that it's higher than the Hindu community, the Indian community's contribution.
Right.
It's probably the most. They have been long established in this country and have vast investments in property, in assets, in businesses. And so they're a very, very significant part of the British economic horizon. In terms of numbers, they're probably about a third of the Indian community, a half of the Hindu community, in the region of some 400,000. So they are smaller than our community, but they're significantly better organized and much better represented across all the diverse areas of British public life.
Absolutely. And let's move on to the British Board of Dharmic Scholars' response to the Faith Manifesto. I'm sorry to cut you off on that because I just wanted to finish the, while we were discussing the topic about the rabbi, I just wanted to finish that and then move on to the next topic. So please go ahead.
Absolutely, that's appreciated. So it's been time, I think it's long overdue, that somebody pieced together the true history of the Labour Party and its relationship with India. Now, most people in our community are very loyal. But equally, I think their loyalty is matched by their lack of understanding or their lack of knowledge of Indian history. As you know, one of our favorite activities is decolonizing history and trying to work through what was done and what ideas were planted, which were actually not based on reality and which were intended to keep the Indian community subservient slaves to the colonial empire. So nobody had really pieced all these things together. So I thought it was about time that we genuinely responded to Jeremy Corbyn's comments in his Faith Manifesto. You see, he has actually said that he would like to do us all the favor of beginning to ensure that colonial history is taught in British schools, which would be a great thing if it, one, wasn't 2 weeks before a general election, and two, if it was done genuinely. You see, if somebody wants to repair the harm that was done in the colonial times, you approach those people who suffered in colonial times, and you ask them, what can we do? Okay? Now, then you take their advice and guidance, and you involve them in the process of healing. What you don't do is work out your own diktat and say, this is what I'm going to do for the benefit of you guys, all right? Because what you're doing is you're not relinquishing power, and you're not relinquishing authority. If anything, you're appropriating the suffering of those who suffered in colonial times to actually raise your own profile. So it felt unpleasant that he had chosen to do this. So I thought, as the Board of Scholars, what we would do is we'd issue a statement which details in a little bit more detail the true history of Labour's relationship with India. We've highlighted, for example, that the Labour Party was responsible at the end of World War II for defaulting. In fact, in 1947, August of 1947, there was a war debt which was owed to India of over £1.5 billion at that time. And that equates to about £70 billion in today's money. Okay, this was a war debt which was calculated, and it was due to India. And India was relying on receiving that money to rebuild its own country after independence. And what Labour did is they defaulted. They did some jiggery-pokery with financial statements and currency manipulations, and all of a sudden, there was no money that could be given to India, and that debt is still due. And that was something that the Labour Party were responsible for. You know, most people don't know that it was the Labour Party who was in power when Idi Amin decided that he threatened to throw Indians into Lake Victoria if they didn't leave the country. That was his direct threat. And the Labour Party, the Labour government, they introduced legislation to prevent British passport holding Gujarati Indians from coming into the United Kingdom. Okay, and then there was a change in Labour in government, and the Conservative government actually arranged to send flights to Uganda to collect those. I suppose they were refugees who were fleeing Uganda at that time and bring them back to the United Kingdom. And in Leicester, of all places, right, the Labour-controlled council in Leicester issued adverts in Ugandan newspapers advising Indians in Uganda not to come and settle in Leicester, right? And it was the Conservative government which overrode that and helped to resettle them in the Leicester area. And again, very few people know that that was a Labour government that was doing these unpleasant things.
Yes, and UK's loss was US's gain. If you go travel
Absolutely.
the length and breadth, I'm sorry, just let me finish. If you travel the length and breadth of United States, you'll see that there are lots of motels you can drive by. Chances are that it is run by a Patel. In fact, it's funnily mentioned as Patel motels. And if you are a vegetarian, rest assured, you'll get a good dal and good chapatis wherever you stay, even in the outreaches like, steppes of Nebraska. You'll find this thing. It's amazing, just amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I cut you off, Satish ji. Please.
No, so that was also something that we thought should be revealed and people should be reminded of. There's a current generation of British Indians who really know nothing about the real history of Labour and the Indians and indeed the British in this country. And we often talk, for another example which we've raised, is that we talk about the British giving India independence. And Labour have often used this as a PR exercise that, hey guys, we are the government who gave you independence. Now, this is just sophistry, this is wordplay, because what really happened is that Britain couldn't manage the colonies after the war anyway. It was on the verge of fleeing, and it was Labour, Clement Attlee, who decided that a parting gift would be to slash Punjab by 2/3 of it and give it to Islamists, and give it to them as a nation. And so the state where the Sikhs were established, 2/3 of it were taken away from them and given to Islamists. Now, when you remember that the Sikh Panth, Guru Gobind Singh, or Gobind Rai as he used to be, he became Guru Gobind Singh, and he established the Panth to fight Islamists.
Right.
And so can you imagine the devastating blow that must have been felt at that time, right across the state, to say, well, 2/3 we're going to give it to those self-same Islamists? And it gets worse. Labour were the people in charge who did that. And they also are responsible for the fact that 24% of the Pakistani population in 1947 in this state that they created were Hindus, and now there are only 2%. Labour were also in charge of the creation of East Pakistan. And since 47 in East Pakistan, 49 million Hindus have disappeared. And this is the Labour Party, which is saying, hey, we are your best friends, we've always looked after you. I think history, the real history, is actually slightly different. At that time, Kashmir was also, the Kashmir issue was precipitated by a departing Labour government. And so they hold more than just a small degree of responsibility for these issues, which Jeremy Corbyn's knowledge of history seems to be completely ignoring.
And Satish ji, to add to that, I don't know if you have mentioned this in your article or not, on 15th August 1947, it was not decided if Lahore was going to be part of India or part of Pakistan. So a lot of the deaths that happened after the independence was because of the fleeing of the Hindu Sikh population from Lahore into India. This was one of the most biggest tragedies, because for the Sikhs, Ranjit Singh's capital was Lahore, and for them it was like taking a limb away. There's a documentary in BBC where one Sikh talks about how his sisters, I
Yes,
mean,
that's
this is
right.
a if you watch that video, it kind of completely breaks your heart down. What kind
Yeah.
of things happen? 17-year-old young daughters being killed by their fathers, beheading because they said that you are not going to be spared by them, and we are not going to be alive, but at least we can spare you the humiliation that's going to come, because they were completely surrounded,
Yes. Yeah.
and houses were being put on fire. It was unspeakable, the kind of things that happened.
This
I'm Go ahead, go
this
ahead.
this was Labour's parting gift to India, and the Kashmir that Labour talks about. It's stunning that that same Kashmir, there were 7 exoduses of the Hindus from that Kashmir as a result of Islamist invasion from Pakistan. 7 exoduses, genocides, and what's happened now is that Jeremy Corbyn is saying, well, we want to support the people in Kashmir. Of course, the people who are occupying those parts of Kashmir are the settlers who came in as a result of Pakistani incursions. And so, where is the equality and where is the human rights regard with regard to their particular case? It's stunning how little of history the Labour Party actually knows. And one of the other things that we point out is that the Congress Party, the Indian National Congress Party, is a creation of Labour. Labour, when they left in place a socialist Indian National Congress Party. And it's the same
Yes.
Congress Party that completely ignored the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits. Right? It completely sent no protection to them whatsoever, and has never made any steps to rectify or even try and heal some of the pain as a result of that genocide. And so we have Labour creating the whole issue in Kashmir, and then appointing the Indian National Congress Party, who continue their tradition of anti-Indian, anti-Hindu activities.
Now, it's very, very sad. I think I can't put this thing down for ignorance, not the British, because I mean, if Jeremy Corbyn doesn't know what Britain did to its colonies, then he doesn't deserve to be prime minister, in my opinion. I mean, you have to have some sense of a balance about what transpired. Sure, you were ruling, you're feasting on the money that came from all these colonies, fine, but at least your moral compass should be, right near the center. And I just
Indeed.
find that shocking.
Well, I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons for concern, because in any field, if you don't have expertise, then you should at least have the decency and the common sense not to venture an opinion and not to dabble in areas where your knowledge is deficient. And the complete unawareness, the lack of sensitivity that, hang on a moment, there are issues here, there are lives at stake, there are national relationships at stake, I need to make sure I know what I'm talking about. It doesn't seem to have actually occurred to him at all. And this is part of what you were saying in the approach to the manifesto. It seems to be, this is the word of Jeremy Corbyn, and you shall accept it as the truth, when actually it's far from the truth. One of the other really incendiary areas in which he's gotten involved is he has declared that they will open up the files on the 1984 incidents. Now, we all
Yes,
know that in 1984, it was the Indian National Congress Party
that was in
which
power.
wreaked
Right.
havoc
Yeah.
and inflicted genocide on the Sikhs.
Right. Right.
And that was the same Indian National Congress Party, which is the beloved socialist offspring of the Labour Party at partition.
I'm seeing this parallels in 3 different countries, Satishji, and viewers. Excuse me if I keep repeating this thing, but they're too strong. I mean, I see this thing again and again, just coming and staring me in the face. The Congress Party in India, the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, and the Democrats in United States. We'll talk about Democrats a little bit later, because today we are talking focused on United Kingdom. Now, it seems like it is not just limited to Corbyn alone, because I'm reading some interesting, I should say, outrageous statements from a Labour MP who's contesting for re-election, Mr. Tanman Desi Singh, I think.
Yes.
And he has been accusing of RSS and BJP meddling in his campaign. Now, I have not seen the Indian High Commission give any kind of a rebuttal for that. But I've also not seen any proof of him supplying how RSS and BJP are meddling in his campaign. Do you have any update on that?
Well, we've been following his activities with great interest, and when he was appointed, I remember the hope and the pleasure with which the whole of the Indian community regarded the fact that we now have a Sikh, a Punjabi Sikh of Indian origin in the House of Commons. What a wonderful development it was. But it's turned, the love affair has turned sour quite some months ago because of the statements that he has been making. You're absolutely right. He is on record as having said that the BJP is targeting him and don't want him to be re-elected. Now, this is complete nonsense. When you make an allegation of that sort, you should be able to provide some sort of an evidence. When the government intervened, there were allegations of Russian interference, then everybody demanded evidence. So evidence is really what is necessary. And of course, they have not produced any evidence. It would have been wonderful if Dhanmanjit had stood there in front of constituents and said, and here is the evidence. But he hasn't done that. So that's a problem. And I'm fairly confident that the Indian government will have noted that that's the case. As you say, no statement has been made to my knowledge, but really the MEA or the High Commission should make a statement rejecting that and saying, if you have evidence, please produce it. Otherwise, withdraw and retract that statement. It's wholly unacceptable.
And also, we have a small clip to share with our viewers. And if you look at the clip, you will see in the background what are the statements that he is trying to pander to here.
ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੇਖੋ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਜੋੜਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਲੋਕ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤੋੜਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਨੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਮੁਰਾਦ ਆ ਆਰਐਸਐਸ ਅਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੱਟੜਪੰਥੀ ਨੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣੀ ਅਖਬਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬੰਦਾ ਆ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਲੋ ਦਾ ਐਮਪੀ ਆ ਤਨਮਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਢੇਸੀ ਇਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਟਾਰਗੇਟ ਲਿਸਟ ਆ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਹਾਲਤ ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਟਾਉਣਾ ਕਿਉਂ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਾ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ ਇਹ ਹਰ ਦਫਾ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਬੁਲੰਦ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੋਣ ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਹੋਣ ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨ ਹੋਣ ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਈਸਾਈ ਹੋਣ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਗੱਲ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੀੜਾ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਪੀੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ ਮਨੁੱਖੀ ਅਧਿਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਬੁਲੰਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਅੱਗੇ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਕਰੂੰਗਾ ਤੇ ਡਟ ਕੇ ਕਰੂੰਗਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਡਰ ਕਰਕੇ ਚੁੱਪ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁਰਤੀ ਚੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਮਿਲੀਆਂ ਆ ਸਰਬੰਸਦਾਨੀ ਸੱਚੇ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਦੇ ਪਿਤਾ ਜੀ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਤੇਗ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰੀ ਪੰਡਿਤ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਆਏ ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਹਾਕਮ ਜੋ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਸ ਮੌਕੇ ਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਰਹਿਣੀ ਸਹਿਣੀ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਸੀਸ ਤੱਕ ਕੁਰਬਾਨ ਕਰਤਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਰਗੇ ਕੁਝ ਚਾਰ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਪਾਸੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਫਰਜ਼ ਬਣਦਾ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰੀ ਭਾਈ ਭੈਣ ਉਹ ਮੇਰੇ ਤੱਕ ਆਏ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਜੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਤਾਲੁਕ ਕੱਟ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਬਲੈਕ ਆਊਟ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕਾ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੋਈ ਤਾਲਮੇਲ ਸਾਡੀ ਹੋ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਉੱਥੇ ਫਿਕਰ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਵੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਬਣੋਗੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੇਫਿਕਰ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਜਾਓ ਬੇਖੌਫ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਬੰਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਬੁਲੰਦ ਕਰੂਗਾ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸੀ ਇਹ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹ ਕੱਟੜਪੰਥੀ ਆ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਰਗੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਐਂਟੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਐਂਟੀ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਆ
And I think the important thing here is that the truth is truth. Truth is absolute. This is what we know. That is what Sanatana Dharma is. Whether you are from Sikh faith or Jain faith or Hindu faith or Buddhist faith, that truth is supreme, is something that is like a founding stone. And you can't just like that, pander to emotions and try to whip up something just to win an election. That's not how it is done, because the member of parliament is a representative of the entire constituency. And by dividing and by trying to put untruths, what happens is you may win the election, but it would be like a Pyrrhic victory, because the other side is going to be so convinced that you're not for them, that the next time around you're going to find the same thing go as a backlash against you. So I just find it very, very sad that not only on this issue, but he has also mentioned something about Guru Gobind Singh and the Kashmiris, where the implication or the inference there is exactly opposite of what Guru Tegh Bahadur had done, right?
Yeah, I know the video you're referring to, and this video is one of those that's gone viral as well. And it's quite stunning. Firstly, we don't leverage the sacrifices of our gurus and our spiritual saints for political purposes. There is something deeply repulsive in somebody who would leverage their sadhana, their kurbani, in the hope of making some political points. And yet in that video, he clearly refers to Guru Tegh Bahadur as receiving appeals from the Kashmiri Pandits. And then he says, I too have basically received appeals from the Kashmiris, and I have responded to them in the manner in which our gurus dictated. And he conceals the fact that the people who came to Guru Tegh Bahadur were actually the Kashmiri Hindus who said, we are being attacked by Islamists, please can you provide your army to fight and protect us. Now, the people who have come to Tanmanjeet Singh Desi are not the Hindus of Kashmir. They are the Islamists who effectively eradicated and removed the Hindus from there. And they apparently are the ones who are now appealing to Tanmanjeet, saying, can you please lobby for Article 370 to be reversed? Can you fight on our behalf? And he has had the audacity to conceal that distinction. The very tradition for which Guru Tegh Bahadur sacrificed his head and became immortalized and martyred and revered, that very enemy community, their ideology is the one that Tanmanjeet is now supporting. And yet he is telling people in Gurdwara that in fact he is following along in the footsteps of Guru Tegh Bahadur. It's reprehensible. And the fact that he's doing it in Gurdwara, which are supposedly charities and they should not be engaging in any political activity, this is an incitement that he's engaging in. And I noticed in the video clip that you've just pointed out, that you mentioned, you will see that there's a big sign of Khalistan. And I'm not quite sure what a Khalistani sign is doing inside of a religious charitable institution, but it's there. And Tanmanjeet should know better as well.
This is a very small minority. And in fact, one of the concerns I have, not just in United Kingdom or United States, but also in India, is that the Sikh population is actually not growing as fast as perhaps the rest of the other populations. And I'd like to see a healthy growth. We are an inclusive society. It doesn't matter where we live. And we would like to see, it doesn't matter where, everybody needs to be growing at the same rate. And I'm a little concerned about a slowdown there. But that's probably not much germane to this debate here. But having seen all the different manifestos, Satish ji, where do you think the British Hindu voter should be looking at for, or who do you think represents Britain best for the next 5 years? Because this is let's assume for matter of debate that it's going to be for the next 5 years. I mean, in that it's a decisive mandate, especially with Brexit. I think the people need to vote decisively.
No, it's very important. There are a couple of points I'd like to make in response to that. One is that traditionally the British Hindu voting track record is appalling. And typically we've had maybe 30%, 32% of the Hindu community actively participating in votes. And this is just completely ridiculous. I think at my last analysis, we had some 60% on average of the British population voted in the last election. And there were a couple of interesting statistics. 68% of the Muslim population voted, 62% of the Sikh population voted, and as I've mentioned, 30% of the Hindu population voted. Now, this is ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. You cannot live in a democratic society, especially a competitive one, where people are pressing and lobbying for resources all the time. You cannot be so foolish as to say, well, actually, I don't need to engage. We have to have a much better representation. And in an election which is as divisive, an election which has been made into toxic, made toxic by the politics of identity. In such an election, it's absolutely important, more than in any other election, that the Indian vote stands up, makes the effort, and puts a cross in the box against the candidates who they wish to support. Now, in response to who I think, I'm very conscious of the fact that the manner in which Jeremy Corbyn's party have burned their bridges with India and with the Indian government, snubbing Prime Minister Modi ji when he came to do his state address of parliament, the ridiculous, unnecessary statements about Kashmir and interfering in India's own internal affairs, the assaults that occurred on the Indian High Commission. All of those incidents, they have a Labour Party involvement in them. And so I'm very concerned that if the Labour Party were to be successful, the relationship between Britain and India would effectively be driven off a cliff. It would nosedive, and that would be terrible. India is a massive country which is reorganizing itself, huge infrastructure projects. There could be great cross-fertilization between the two, and for it to be completely deconstructed simply because of ideological dogma is a very, very genuine concern. The nature in which they've behaved whilst in opposition does not give confidence that they would dramatically improve and transform into something wonderful if they became government. So that's a very, very stark alarm bell. Of the parties, the only parties, as I've mentioned before, who have been open to engagement and very keen to engage has been the Conservatives and to a lesser degree the Lib Dems. So speaking purely and solely in a private capacity and not on behalf of the National Council of Hindu Temples or any charity that I may be associated with, I think the evidence before us would indicate that a vote for the Labour Party would be completely politically suicidal for the British Indian community. And so I know that most people who have studied the evidence have decided that they're going to vote for the Conservative Party, and I can understand their reasons for doing so.
You know, from what the numbers that Pandit Satish ji is saying, is 1 in 3 only go and vote. Voters, it's not only your right, but it's also your responsibility. And if you think that it is a big task to go and vote, just consider this. When I vote, and I get to vote every 2 years in California, and usually I get a book this thick a month ahead of the elections. There are so many things to vote on. My vote is 6 feet long. I kid you not, it's 6 feet long. The next time I'm going to go to vote, I'll show you what I have to vote. It is 6 feet long and it's printed on both sides. And I have to choose and vote on so many different propositions. These are all located to my district, my county, my state. So that and then sometimes it's even my school district, which is different from my district. So all sorts of things have to be voted on, and we have to do a lot of research on trying to find out whether you should vote yes or no, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, we take this thing very, very seriously. We spend 4 to 6 hours mulling over the whole thing, looking at the candidates, what they stand for, and how we should be voting. And so at the end of the day, when we go to the election booth, we are ready. And it's like tick, 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 done, and then put it there and then come back. We can also vote before the elections. That's also an option given to us. The point I'm trying to make is you don't get this thing, and this is perhaps one of the most crucial elections. There is a shift away from globalism, and every country now is starting to do bilaterals with other countries, and I think it's in Britain's best interest to do the bilateral with India, having had such a rich heritage of history. I mean, let's look at all the good things also, right? I mean, the British did give India the railway system, although it might be also argued that they wanted the railways to be very close to the centers of power. All you have to do is look at the Nizam or any other kingdom. The railway station was within a kilometer of the residence bungalow, and both were within a couple of kilometers of the king's palaces. So, but the point of all this is, do go out there and vote, and we might have more sessions, as a matter of fact, before the elections.
Yeah, I think we'll probably squeeze in a couple. I'd just like to conclude with a reminder that today is the 26th of November, and on the 26th we had that appalling atrocity where the evidence has now proven that Pakistan-supported terrorists attacked the hotel in Mumbai. And I know that a lot of people are remembering that incident with a great deal of solemnity and a great deal of humility. So it's probably worth remembering that our choices do have an impact. And if we refuse to engage and have our voices heard, then the consequences of doing that, when we realize what the consequences are because of changes on the ground reality, it's often too late. And so we have to have an increasing level of engagement politically. And so thank you for your advice to our community that they must vote. And I would just like to emphasize that it's a more critical election than any other. So yes, everybody needs to get out and vote.
Thank you very much, Satish ji, and we'll be back with more news from United Kingdom.
Pranam Sri Ayurji, and my best regards, and look forward to speaking to you very soon. Things are happening so fast, I'm sure it won't be too long. So
Yes.
Pranam and Namaskar.
Namaskar to you too. Thank you very much.